Nancy is a conductor's daughter. One day she was working on Skarloey with some polish and a rag. Skarloey was snoozing happily, but Nancy wanted to talk. "Wake up, lazy bones. Your brass is filthy. Aren't you ashamed?" "No," yawned Skarloey.
Well, that's real nice of you, Skarloey. You have this girl donating her time to clean you, and you act like what she's doing isn't a big deal. This famous narrow gauger seems to be a bit arrogant today. What was really on Skarloey's mind was his good friend Rheneas, who was out at the works being fixed. Funny, I remember him clearly sitting in on the other story several entries ago.
Nancy interrupted again. "Don't you want to look nice when Rheneas comes home?" Skarloey wasn't sleepy anymore. "What? When?" "Soon. Daddy told me. I'm going now," she said. "Nancy, stop! Do I really look nice?"
Oh sure, now you pay attention to her. What gives, you candy cane-coated engine? I like Nancy, at least she knows when to call it quits. Unlike someone else who didn't know when to quit. A Scottish banana-coated engine. And I'm sure it certainly didn't sit well with him, being that Skarloey looked shinier than he had ever been before, while he was still dusty.
"Never mind, Duncan." But Duncan did mind. "It isn't fair," he complained. "Peter Sam gets a special funnel, Sir Handel gets special wheels, passengers get ice cream, but I'm not even polished."
I think there is a very clear explanation for that. Why else would Duncan not be treated nicely? Maybe because of that lousy attitude. Like that would fix it anyway, though. Come on, Duncan, don't kid yourself. Later in the day, things would only make Duncan even saltier when one of Skarloey's trains suffered a derailment. Because of course Duncan is the only engine available to help.
"We'll have to take workmen there right away." "All this extra work," grumbled Duncan. "It wears an engine out." "Rubbish. Come on."
And it's not like Duncan had to really do a lot of heavy lifting. All he did was bring the workmen to the scene and then take the other passengers back home. Now, if he was asked to move the coaches back onto the rails, then yeah, that's asking for a miracle. Thankfully, the tension doesn't feel too high with the Skarloey Railway theme playing in the background.
He sulked all the way. "I get no rest, I get no rest," he muttered. Duncan made the journey very difficult.
Yeah, and I stand corrected on the music too. Back to old, bouncy, and frustrated. If anything, the backed-up view of the Sodor Castle Causeway really gives the audience a much better sight of that mountain sitting behind everything else. But for Duncan, he was anything but enjoying what he was doing. He took forever to make steam. Duncan's real issue was that he felt neglected. This only led to him getting even more angry.
"I'm overworked, and I won't stand it." At last they reached the viaduct near the station. "Come on, Duncan," called his driver. "One more effort, and you'll have a rest and a drink at the station."
Duncan decided to do the unthinkable and halt himself on the bridge, although we all know that wasn't really him per se, it was his driver. And even though the narration says he stayed there as he was, that's a complete lie. His driver could very well let off the brake and get Duncan going. Why? Because the engines can't control their internal mechanisms. This has already been proven. But seeing that this series doesn't want to acknowledge that, Skarloey came instead and brought Duncan and the rest of his train back to Rheneas' station.
The passengers were furious. They told everyone what a bad railway it was. That night, Sir Topham Hatt spoke to Duncan. "No passengers means no polish, and no polish means no passengers," Duncan muttered to himself. He still has a lot to learn, doesn't he?
Indubitably, Duncan is one sorry excuse of a narrow gauge engine. At least Smudger, as bad as he was, had fun making problems. Duncan just complains about everything and causes problems. Hopefully he picks up in demeanor, a little. I'm not asking for a complete overhaul, because he did show that when he apologized to Rusty. If Duncan maintains the opinion of, "I won't work if I'm not taken care of," that means he probably won't be working anytime soon. And although Skarloey was featured here, he didn't really have a moment to develop. He thinks about Rheneas and then is silent the rest of the time, even after taking Duncan all the way home. This episode was okay, but there's something odd again about the order of things. We clearly saw Rheneas in the last few stories, but it was never mentioned when and why Rheneas went to the works. Come to think of it, Rheneas has said even less lines than Duke. As a matter of fact, no lines. That's awful. Rheneas, I would think, is like second in command to Skarloey on this railway, and we haven't heard him say zilch yet. That I'm not okay with. Music was fine for this entry. Much of the time, the Skarloey Railway theme is played with occasionally different instruments, while Duncan's is heard whenever he's around in general. For locations, it seems like Duncan's trip took the whole way around the line. Everything from Croven's Gate to Rheneas' Viaduct is shown. There's also the mountain line, and that wonderful view of the Sodor Castle Causeway. Here's hoping we get something out of Rheneas sometime soon. Next episode is Gallant Old Engine. Thanks for watching.